Chapter number 5 of Old New Zealand, being Incidents of Native Customs and Character in the Old Times, by Frederick Edward Maning. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter number 5. Every Englishman's house is his castle. My estate and castle. How I purchased my estate. Native titles to land. Of what nature. Value of land in New Zealand. Land commissionaires. The triumphs of eloquence. Magna Charta. Every Englishman's house is his castle. I scorn the foreign yoke, and glory in the name of Britain, and all that. The natural end, however, of all castles is to be burnt or blown up. In England it is true you can call the constable, and should any foreign power attack you with grinding organ and white mice, you may hope for succours from without, from which cause castles in England are more long-lived. In New Zealand, however, it is different, as to the present day the old system prevails, and castles continue to be disposed of in the natural way, as can be seen lately in Taranaki. I now purchased a piece of land and built a castle for myself. I really can't tell to the present day who I purchased the land from, for there were about 50 different claimants, every one of whom assured me that the other 49 were humbugs, and had no right whatsoever. The nature of the different titles of the different claimants were various. One man said his ancestors had killed off the first owners. Another declared his ancestors had driven off the second party. Another man, who seemed to be listened to with more respect than ordinary, declared that all his ancestors had been the first possessor of all, and had never been ousted, and that this ancestor was a huge lizard that lived in a cave on the land many ages ago. And sure enough, there was the cave to prove it. Besides the principal claims, there were an immense number of secondary ones, a sort of latent equities, which had lain dormant until it was known the Pakeha had his eye on the land. Some of them seemed to me at the time odd enough. One man required payment because his ancestors, as he affirmed, had exercised the right of catching rats on it, but which he, the claimant, had never done, for the best of reasons, i.e. there were no rats to catch, except indeed Pakeha rats, which were plenty enough, but this variety of rodent was not counted as game. Another claimed because his grandfather had been murdered on the land, and, as I am a voracious Pakeha, another claimed payment because his grandfather had committed the murder. Then half the country claimed payments of various value, from 1 fig of tobacco to a musket, on account of a certain wahi tapu, or ancient burying ground, which was on the land, and in which every one almost had relations or other ancestors buried, as they could clearly make out in old times, though no one had been deposited in it for about 200 years, and the bones of the others had been, as they said, removed long ago to a taurere in the mountains. It seemed an awkward circumstance that there was some difference of opinion as to where this same wahi tapu was situated, being and lying, for in case of my buying the land it was stipulated that I should fence it around and make no use of it, although I had paid for it. I, however, have put off fencing till the exact boundaries have been made out, and indeed I don't think I shall ever be called on to do so, the fencing proviso having been made, as I now believe, to give a stronger look of reality to the existence of the sacred spot, it having been observed that I had some doubts on the subject. No mention was ever made of it after the payments had all been made, and so I think I may venture to affirm that the existence of the said wahi tapu is of very doubtful authenticity, though it certainly cost me a round lot of trade. There was one old man who obstinately persisted in declaring that he, and he alone, was the sole and rightful owner of the land, He seemed also to have a fixed idea about certain barrels of gunpowder, but as he did not prove his claim to my satisfaction, and as he had no one to back him, I of course gave him nothing. He nevertheless demanded the gunpowder about once a month for 25 years, till at last he died of old age, and I am now a landed proprietor, clear of all claims and demands, and have an undeniable right to hold my estate as long as ever I am able. It took about 3 months' negotiation before the purchase of the land could be made, and indeed I at one time gave up the idea, as I found it quite impossible to decide whom to pay. If I paid one party, the others vowed I should never have possession, and to pay all seemed impossible. So at last I let all parties know that I had made up my mind not to have the land. This, however, turned out to be the first step I had made in the right direction, for thereupon all the different claimants agreed amongst themselves to demand a certain quantity of goods, and divide them amongst themselves afterwards. I was glad of this, for I wished to buy the land, as I thought, in case I should ever take a trip to the colonies, it would look well to be able to talk of my estate in New Zealand. The day being now come on which I was to make the payment, and all parties present, I then and there handed over to the assembled mob the price of the land, consisting of a great lot of blankets, muskets, tomahawks, tobacco, spades, axes, etc., etc., and received in return a very dirty piece of paper with all their marks on it. I have written the terms of transfer on it in English to my own perfect satisfaction. The cost per acre to me was, as near as can be, about 5½ times what the same quantity of land would have cost me at the same time in Tasmania. But this is not of much importance, as the value of land in New Zealand then, and indeed now, being chiefly imaginary, one could just as easily suppose it to be of a great value as a very small one. I therefore did not complain of the cost. While I am on the subject of land and land titles, I may as well here mention that many years after the purchase of my land I received notice to appear before certain persons called land commissioners, who were part and parcel of the new inventions which had come up soon after the arrival of the first governor, and which are still a trouble to the land. I was informed that I must appear and prove my title to the land I have mentioned, on pain of forfeiture of the same. Now, I could not see what right anyone could have to plague me in this way, and if I had had no one but the commissioners and 200 or 300 men of their tribe to deal with, I should have put my pa in fighting order, and told them to come on. Before this time I had an occasion to build a pa, in consequence of a little misunderstanding, and being a regularly naturalized member of the strong tribe, could raise men to defend it at the shortest notice. But somehow these people had cunningly managed to mix up the name of Queen Victoria, God bless her, no disparagement to King Potato, in the matter. And I, though a Pakeha Maori, am a loyal subject of Her Majesty, and will stick up and fight for her as long as ever I can muster a good imitation of courage, or a leg to stand upon. This being the case, I made a very unwilling appearance at the court, and explained and defended my title to the land in an oration of 4 hours and a half duration, which, though I was much out of practice, I flatter myself was a good specimen of English rhetoric, and for its own merits, as well as for another reason which I was not aware of at the time, was listened to by the court with the greatest patience. When I had concluded, and been asked if I had anything more to say, I saw the commissioner beginning to count my words, which had been all written, I suppose, in shorthand, and having ascertained how many thousand I had spoken, he handed me a bill, in which I was charged by the word, for every word I had spoken, at the rate of 1 farthing and 1/20 per word. Oh Cicero! Oh Demosthenes! Oh Pitt, Fox, Burke, Sheridan! Oh Daniel O'Connell! What would have become of you if such a stopper had been clapped upon your jawing tackle? Fame would never have cracked her trumpet, and Dan would never have raised the rint. For my part, I have never recovered the shock. I have since that time become taciturn, and have adopted a Spartan brevity when forced to speak, and I fear I shall never again have the full swing of my mother tongue. Besides this, I was charged 10 shillings each for a little army of witnesses I had brought, by way of being on the sure side, 5 shillings a head for calling them into court, and 5 more for examining them, said examination consisting of 1 question each, after which they were told to be off. I do believe, had I brought up a whole tribe as I had thoughts of doing, the commissioners would not have minded examining them all. They were, I am bound to say, very civil and polite. One of them told me I was a damned infernal clever fellow, and he should like to see a good many more like me. I hope I am not getting tedious, but this business made such an impression on me that I can't help being too prolix, perhaps, when describing it. I have, however, often since that time had my doubts whether the Queen, God bless her, got the money, or knew half as much of the affair as they wanted to make out. I don't believe it. Our noble Queen would be clean above such a proceeding, and I mean to say it's against Magna Charta. It is. Justice shall not be sold, saith Magna Charta. And if it's not selling justice to make a loyal Pakeha Maori pay for every word he speaks when defending his rights in a court of justice, I don't know what it is. Well, to make matters up, they after some time gave me a title for my land, as if I had not got one before. But then, after some years, they made me give it back again, on purpose, as they said, that they might give me a better. But since that time several more years have passed, and I have not got it. So, as these things are now all the fashion, I wish I may get it. End of chapter 5.